So another thing to note here is when we're reinstalling our seed discs back onto the opener, there is a process here in order to get the contact patch on the seed discs correct. John Deere's used two different thicknesses of seed disc. Earlier models like this would have originally had a 3mm disc. Newer models, the cast XP shanks, came with a 3.5. We do have to be very careful when we're setting up these using the shims that they come with, that we get the correct amount of shims to get the correct contact patch back on the disc when it's reinstalled. There's typically a business card trick. We use two business cards slid in beside the discs. On the 3mm discs, we want to see between 2 and 2.5 inches contact patch. On the 3.5mm discs, we want to see 1 to 1.5 inches of contact patch. That's what's recommended. So next we want to inspect, we've got our seed discs on here, we've got them shimmed correctly, our contact patch using the business cards has been done, and we're good to go there. Our gauge wheels have been reinstalled. We want to look at our gauge wheel. This example here is a little bit different than most. This is our conceal. It's actually a split gauge wheel. We can talk about that later on. But essentially we want to do, again, a visual inspection of the wheel. Want to make sure that the lip on the inside here that contacts the seed disc is in good order. We don't have any cracking or tearing, that we've still got a nice sharp edge there that's going to act as a scraper and keep mud and dry dirt from getting inside of our wheel and ending up in our seed trench. We want to just spin the wheel, make sure that it's nice and round. When we've got it installed, we want to check the contact of our gauge wheel to our seed disc. And the way that we do that is we set our T-handle at our desired depth. If we want to bring the camera in here, we raise our gauge wheel up to our desired height. And we want to make sure that we've got that gauge wheel snug to the disc. We don't want to have a big gap here. We want to have it snug, and we want to have it so that as that gauge wheel spins, it essentially wants to spin that disc as well. And so if we've got that tolerance set, what that essentially gets us is it prevents dry dirt from getting behind our gauge wheel and into our furrow, or consequently mud. If we're in muddy conditions, we can get mud, it'll build up and pack in behind that gauge wheel. So even though we don't have any on this row unit here in front of us, scrapers would be another thing to look at as far as a wear and maintenance concern. There's typically 3 types of scrapers available for the John Deere row unit: a solid one piece, a rotary, or a silicon carbide version. In all examples, we just want to look for unusual wear, bent or broken arms, any sort of unusual characteristics of that scraper. We want to make sure they've got a good contact patch. The solid one piece, if they're worn down any more than 1/2 inch, we want to warrant replacement of those. So we've got our gauge wheels, our seed discs, we've got the shank all inspected. Next on our list would be our closing assembly, the tail section here. Again, we want to take the spring pressure off of it. This particular one has been upgraded to a bearing assembly as opposed to the original bushing. But with the original style, you basically want to relieve our spring pressure, grab a hold of it, and just give it a wiggle side to side and check how much play is in that bushing area right here. If it does become excessive, of course, you can upgrade it to this style. There are a number of different options available, whether you replace the whole tail section casting or upgrade to this bearing assembly. You want to look at your T-handles. You'll want to look inside underneath here, and I don't know if you'll be able to get it with the camera, but this cast piece where the spring mounts, there's a little eyelet. Those have a tendency to wear. That spring will wear into it, and they can eventually crack right off. We want to be able to set our spring tension on our tail section. We recommend using a bathroom scale and adjusting the tail section positioning so that we get a consistent force all the way across each row for what notch 1 versus notch 2 would equal. We also would like to do a visual inspection on our closing wheels, whether you have a rubber wheel or a spiked wheel, a cast wheel, any of the number of different versions that are out there. Just give it a spin, listen again for any rough bearings. Do a visual inspection of the rubber and the plastic. We do see that the plastics can wear and start to peel out. Maybe get some dirt and debris inside there. So one thing that's often overlooked with our closing wheel assembly is actually setting up our closing wheels to reflect our average planting depth. A good general rule of thumb is if we're trying to achieve a 2-inch planting depth for corn, we want to see that the gap on our closing wheels on the bottom is roughly 2 inches from the center of the wheel to the center of the wheel. And that's achieved by shimming this wheel out as it mounts to the tail section assembly. If we have our tail section closing wheels mounted too narrow and we're trying to plant at 2 inches, we're only going to close the top of the furrow. If we have them too wide, we're only going to close the bottom of the furrow and we're going to leave the top of the furrow open. So that basically covers front to back, the row unit, just some of the common maintenance points that you're going to be looking at this winter when you pull your planters into the shop, or whether you do it in the spring in front of the shop with the sun shining on you. We've tried to cover just about everything here that we could think of, the normal points. I'm sure there might be 1 or 2 things that we've missed. Be sure to let us know in the comments below. We appreciate you being here with us, and hopefully we've helped you just a little bit.